Welcome class, welcome students and new people. My name is Denzel Rodriguez, your personal finance geek of the 21st century. And today we're going to be doing a deep dive on how to find the right home equity line of credit in the second position in the state of New Hampshire. So in this series, we've been going state by state, dissecting many different banks across the United States to help you find the right product for you to implement the velocity strategies that we teach on this YouTube channel using credit cards, personal lines of credits, business lines of credits, home equity lines of credits, first, second position, and even cash value life insurance policies. So with that being said, we're going to take it to the whiteboard. We're going to dive right into the material. If you are tuning in from New Hampshire, this video is made just for you. Also, on the screen and in the chat, in the live chat, I've got an exclusive offer for lifetime coaching just for those who come present, ready, and available to learn, do the pregame work, do the action items to set yourselves up financially in a good position to implement these strategies, but also have the accountability and support that many need and often do not invest in themselves, and they end up making lots of financial mistakes, such as picking the wrong tool. And that is one of the main ingredients to have a successful velocity banking plan, is having the right tool in the right season, in the right time, in the right setting, with the right features and benefits. All of that needs to align before you even implement the strategy. So in this series, every single time I'm going over the action items to the point where you can literally recite them to me. So if you're someone that has been enjoying this series, you're attending all of them or catching the replays, I know it's going to sound like a broken record, but you have to understand how important these action items are. They literally are the key to saving you tens of thousands of dollars over the span of your debt-free journey. So the better you understand this, having this framework literally not only sets you up successfully to get out of debt faster, but also when you're completely debt-free, you now are a better borrower. You're more efficient at borrowing, so you're able to lend more efficiently. You're able to create arbitrage better when you leverage debt for cash flow production. Most of us are trying to get out of debt, so we're using these properly structured lines of credits to accelerate our debt. So we're using debt to pay debt and reducing our daily cost of interest. That helps us get out of debt faster by increasing our cash flow faster. But then there's also a world where you can use these tools to actually invest and make more money and actually create more wealth. So I'll have a whole series on that eventually, but my goal is to get through every single state in America and hit on all these different banks. So action items are, I want to see you at a credit score 720 or higher before you apply at that bank for that HELOC. I want your DTI at 30% or lower. No more than 45%. I really don't want you breaching above 40%. LTV, loan to value options with banks usually range between 70 and 90%, but can go as high up to 95 to 100%. Closing costs, typically with the right bank, we can get anywhere from no closing costs to low closing costs, $500 or less. Anything above that, when you start getting into the $1,000 or more range, to me, that is a high closing cost and could potentially be a deal breaker for me. Intro rate. Usually we are going to see 6 to 12 months where you can get intro rates in the range of as low as 0%. We found banks in this series that do 0% intro rate for like 3 months. But the typical range you're going to see is anywhere between 1.99% to 5.99, maybe a little bit higher. And then in some rare cases, you're going to see fixed home equity, line of credit, variable rate, with a 3 to 5 year rate lock option. And that range typically right now in this environment, 2025, is around maybe 5.5%, maybe 6%, maybe a little bit more. Interest rate calculation, there's only 3 ways your rate is calculated: prime, prime minus, or prime plus. We try to avoid prime plus as much as we can. That is another deal breaker for me. For example, let's say you get a 12-month intro rate, but it's prime plus 2% and has closing costs. That to me could be a deal breaker. It's not worth getting the intro rate of 12 months. I actually would rather be at a prime or prime minus with no intro rate and no closing costs. Okay. So those are some things to be aware of. Draw period 10 years is typically what you'll see. The lowest is 5 years with a high of 20 years. It's important for you to build a relationship with the bank that you choose to work with in advance of applying. That means opening up a checking and a savings. That means moving your paychecks over. Okay? Mobile banking, extremely important for you to increase velocity. When you have the mobile banking option, that just tells us the bank is a brick and mortar location and they offer checking accounts. You can link the checking account to the HELOC and you can instantly move money in and out. That's very, very important for the velocity strategy. And lastly is payment calculation. There's only 2 ways your payment is set up. It's either going to be an interest-only HELOC or a principal and interest HELOC. It's important that the home equity line of credit is in fact a home equity line of credit and not a home equity loan. The main distinction is that it is revolving. As long as the line of credit's revolving, it's an open-ended line of credit. The money I put into the line of credit, I can take back out at any time during the draw period. Very, very important. To decide between interest only or principal and interest payment is going to be contingent on the rate calculation. If with the bank, XYZ Bank, for example, if there's no distinction, the interest-only HELOC, the principal and interest HELOC is both based off of prime minus, then I will typically lean more toward the interest only for convenience. But when I'm working with my clients, I tend to push them more toward, hey, get the principal and interest payment option. That just is going to encourage us to pay off the HELOC faster. It's going to force us to pay down that line of credit. We don't want to be incentivized necessarily or forget, because that can happen. People just forget sometimes that required payment is only interest and they think they might be sending money to principal. So having the principal and interest payment just sets a standard that whatever we do with this HELOC, we're also setting it up to be paid off. Okay? Those are the action items. As of September 2025, we are now at a 7.25% interest rate. Those of you who already have HELOCs in place, you're going to experience a rate reduction come the first of the month in October, minus 0.25%, because we were just at 7.5%. With that being said, as you're researching banks right now towards the end of September 2025, and maybe even into October, you're going to see multiple banks where they're showing what their rate is, and many of them are going to show 7.5%. Keep in mind, if the language, when we're looking at interest rate calculation, when we're on their website and it says prime, Wall Street Journal prime, and it says 7.5%, translate that to 7.25. You will actually have a 7.25 rate, not a 7.5. their website they just haven't updated their website yet. Okay, so just keep that in mind when we're doing our research together. With that being said, I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 solid credit unions in the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire came to play, which I like. We have competition, which is great. We've got multiple banks offering quite a few different incentives. So we're going to go through it thoroughly, starting with Bellwether Community Credit Union. They're offering a 5.99% interest rate for 6 months. It's an intro rate. Then it goes to a prime minus 0.25%. So we would be at 7% 6 months from now if we got this HELOC. 85% is the loan to value in order to get that prime minus 0.25 and that 5.99. We can only go as high as 85% LTV. They do have an annual fee of $50. I'm not a big stickler on annual fees. Those tend to be really, really small. If it's like over $100, I might be a little sus because I could probably find a different bank that doesn't charge that. And closing costs, I put a little bit of a question mark because on their site it showed in one area it said no closing costs, and then in another area it said $0 to $1,500. And this is a mobile friendly bank as well. So now let's take it to the screen, computer screen, and we're going to look at Bellwether Community Credit Union. So here we have the details. As you can see, home equity line up to 85%, intro rate 5.99, 6 months, then prime minus 0.25. People will make this dramatic error when they try to get the max approval. When we're doing velocity banking, we often do not need to take the max amount of equity out of our home. We often do not need to do that. I understand the attraction to it, but if you're not paying attention, it could cost you thousands of dollars. So if you went 85% and up, you're going to pay an extra 2.5% in interest costs every single month, every single year, as long as you have that HELOC. So instead of being at prime minus 0.25, you're at prime plus 0.25. So you would be at 9.75% in 2025. That's extremely unattractive, and you don't even get the promo rate. All right. Don't make that error, please. Do not make that error. So notice how right here it says prime as of 1/1/2025 was 7.5%. So just translate that to 7.25. You're actually going to be at 7% once the intro rate is done. Notice here, annual fee of $50 is due on the anniversary date of your agreement. To open the plan, you must pay certain fees to third parties, generally totaling between $0 and $1,500. Okay, keep that in mind. But then I come over here and it says no closing costs. HELOCs typically have no closing costs unless a trust review or title search needs to be completed. Okay, so that's still up for question. There could be a scenario where there is no cost, and there could be a scenario where maybe there is. All right. And this bank is in the state of New Hampshire. Not bad right out the gate. 5.99, 6 months, prime minus. Those are like two most attractive things to me for a second lien HELOC. I really, really enjoy any kind of home equity line of credit That's going to give me a prime minus rate and an intro rate out the gate. Really love that. Okay. The next bank we have is Granite State Credit Union. No intro rate option, but they do a prime minus 0.25%. Just because they're offering a prime minus, they made it to the whiteboard. Okay, that's why we threw them on there. 80% LTV with an annual fee of $45. And one thing that I found very interesting with this bank, and you have to be careful, they have a 9-year draw period with a 1-year repayment, which could potentially result in a balloon payment. What that means is if, let's say you're doing velocity banking, you get out of debt, we're in year 9, you borrow $75,000, you go make an investment. Year 10, let's just say you're not able to pay off that $75K in full, you're going to be required to pay it in full. You're going to have this balloon payment. That could result in an issue later on. So that's something you want to keep in mind, but I figured I share that with you because it's little things like that oftentimes when we're not reading. But guess what? You're dealing with a finance geek, and I read between the lines. I may not read as many books, but when it comes to money, when it comes to banks' websites and little paragraphs, boy, do I read between the lines. So you've got that coverage. So here we have Granite. We're on their home equity page here. We come down. Home equity lines of credits. They have multiple products, as you can see. Fix, 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 fix. You do not want to be in any fixed home equity line of credit product in 2025 unless unless the rate is prime minus. So you do not want to be hanging around 11% fixed rate, 10, 8.75. It's just not attractive, okay? Here is the only product I'm looking at. Is this prime minus 0.25%, 80% LTV? That to me is attractive. We come over to this little paragraph. 9-year draw, 1-year repayment may result in a balloon payment. Keep that in mind. That's important if you go with this bank. Got to be careful of that. We need credit score 700. I also like that. My credit score doesn't need to be as high to get that product, so that's cool. Closing costs, $400 to $800 on all home equity plans. Okay. See if there's anything else that we saw in here. Yeah, and then we got the annual fee, $45. See how this website is updated as of September 18, 2025. So they've updated their site. Now, they have a 10-year product. Then they also have a 15-year product. But I didn't really love the 15-year product because it's only a 5-year draw and a 10-year repayment. So if you're not wanting to put yourself in a position of potentially creating a balloon, then okay, maybe you would go with this option instead. It's the same thing, prime minus 0.25, 80% LTV, same closing costs, same credit score, all that good stuff. But I just didn't love the 5-year draw. Okay. Next bank, Members First Credit Union. What you will start to notice in this series is there are banks across the United States with literally the same name, but it could be a totally different bank. I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, there's a bank called Members First Credit Union, but it had a totally different option, if I'm not mistaken, on their intro rate. So what I have here on the board is another Members First Credit Union, specifically in the state of New Hampshire. They're doing 6.5% for 12 months, and then it goes to just prime, 80% LTV, no closing costs, with a max credit line of $400,000, annual fee of $50, mobile banking friendly. We like that. Okay, so now competition has officially begun. We've got 5.99 for 6 months, then prime minus 0.25, or would you rather have 6.5% for 12 months and then end up at just prime with no closing costs? 80% LTV, a little bit less than 85. Max credit line of 400,000. I don't know what the max is with Bellwether. You would have to ask. Call them and ask. So let's take a look at their bank. Members First Credit Union. As you can see, no application fees, no closing costs. That's cool. Easily access funds, so that's mobile banking friendly. They say it again, no closing costs. We do have an annual fee. What credit score do they want us to have? I don't know if they showed it on here. Come over to view rates. Here we have the details of their first lien products, second lien products. So we have second lien 5-year draw, prime, 80%. Skip over the second one. That's prime plus 2 just to be at a max of 100%. So even if you did 81% LTV, you're prime plus 2. So don't make that mistake. Make sure your actual LTV is below 80% when you go to apply. And they got that 6.5 rate for the first 12 months. This bank also does a first lien HELOC product. Again, max credit line, 400,000. Pretty straightforward. Okay. We've got some competition. Next bank is GFA Credit Union, coming in at 4.99 so far, the lowest intro rate option on the board. 4.99% for 6 months. Then it goes to prime minus 0.5% with a 10-year draw, 80% LTV. Which would you rather have? Prime minus 0.5, but a shorter intro period, but a lesser rate out the gate? Or do you go higher intro rate, end up at prime, or somewhere in the middle where you get the benefits of an intro rate and a prime minus? How do you decide? We'll get into that in a little bit. Coming back to the board, our screen. GFA, better banking. Here's the breakdown. We've got home equity line of credit. Now, the other interesting thing about this bank is they do offer home equity line of credits on an investment property. So HELOCs on rentals, that banks offer that product, is a little more rare. So every now and then, if I do find it, I do want to call that out and say, hey, if you're someone that has a rental property and you're looking for a HELOC, you might want to take a look at GFA if you live in New Hampshire. All right. So we're going to click on details for home equity line of credit. We got that 6-month intro, 10-year draw. All right. let's see what other info we can pull. Went over the check rates. This is where I discovered the prime minus. So their website is in fact updated. Says it right here, prime minus. Not bad at all. We are not complaining. Good product, good product. So like I said, New Hampshire came to play. Came to compete, I should say. Next bank, Service Credit Union. 6.49% for the first 12 months. Then it goes to prime, flat, with a 10-year draw. Yes, there's closing costs, mobile banking friendly. Let's take a look. $6.49, boom. It says 7.5, but just in your head, translate that to 7.25. Click Learn More. You're going to want to read through all this. I'm looking for the highlighted details. And I was able to find that both HELOCs and home equity loans carry closing costs and fees, which may range anywhere from 2 to 5% of the loan. So if you're getting a $100,000 line of credit, you can expect to pay anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000 just to get that product. To me, that could be a deal breaker, potentially. Now, it does say, we keep reading, some financial institutions may waive these fees up front, but they could be included in your final payment. Okay. You may also be charged an annual fee on your HELOC, which is payable in addition. Okay. So I like how they're kind of educating us as well. The higher your credit score, the better. No, that's not the person I want to talk to at this bank. Yep. Not seeing too much other details here. I don't know what the max credit line is. But again, they are competing with that promo rate, 6.49 for 12. But if we come back to the whiteboard, we see how Members First was doing pretty much the same rate, 6.5 for 12 months at prime. I believe the draw period is 10 years. No closing costs. This does have closing costs pretty high from what it looks like, and there's an annual fee attached to that as well. Next bank we have on the board, competing, New Hampshire Federal Credit Union is coming to compete. 80% LTV, 5.99 for 12 months. Then it's a prime rate, so 7.25. Keep reading. Max credit line, 400,000. Let me put that on the board. So I forgot to put that detail. So max 400,000 credit line. Then 10-year draw. We're not required to pull any money out initially. We always love that. Let's see. No closing costs at consumption. We love that. Just got to keep it open for 3 years if you get this product. That's not going to be a big deal for the vast majority of us that are focused on getting out of debt. or paying off a lot of debt. So very competitive bank. The final one I found was Lighthouse Credit Union. Okay. This is what their site looks like. I can already tell it's mobile friendly because of how updated the site looks. So they do 90% LTV, no closing costs for first-time applicants only. Keep that in mind. Keep reading through all this. Scroll down, we come down to home equity loan and home equity line rates. What are we focused on? These two products right here. Anytime you see that word, it's not what we're looking for. So we got 10-year draw, 15-year repayback, 7.25, 80%, or 7.5% going up to 90%. So again, we're going to want to stay in that 80% range so we can get the best rate, which is just prime. Not bad. And we keep reading. Boom, boom. Rates include loan discount. Loan discounts do not apply to credit cards, interest only HELOCs. Okay. So there's no additional rate reduction. Home equity line of credit, interest only. Boom, prime. Okay. No closing costs. Again, first time applicants only. Otherwise could be up to 1,000. And I think that is everything I found on this website specifically. So I think that's a healthy amount of research so far. It's a healthy amount of research so far. Now we have done the market research. Let's say you live in the state of New Hampshire. You've done the action items. You have your framework. Now we begin to narrow and say, okay, which is the bank that offers the most amount of incentives for the least amount of costs? And that's the bank that we're most likely going to call and get more details. So, where do we start? Where do we start? So, key details. In terms of value, what do I value most of the different incentives? The thing I value most with a home equity line of credit in the second position is a prime minus rate. So that's my opinion, right? And you can choose to align with me or not. So if we do that, then we can say, well, Bellwether, Granite, and GFA all have prime minus options. Prime minus 0.5, prime minus 0.25, prime minus 0.25. The other banks are all just prime. Members, Lighthouse, New Hampshire, and Service. The second thing I value most is some kind of a teaser intro rate to have that initial velocity and launch when we start the strategy. I'm trying to create a massive boost, early wins, increased velocity. So, out of the prime minus banks, only two of them offer an intro rate on top of prime minus. That's GFA and Bellwether, so Granite falls off. So far, Granite is fallen off compared to Bellwether and GFA. Set aside these 4 banks. So now you got 5.99 for 6, 4.99 for 6. And you get an additional prime minus 0.5%, 10-year draw, 80% LTV. So out of Bellwether and GFA, we'll come over here. We'll list out our top picks so far. GFA is my number 1. And let me go back to GFA real quick. Let me see if they were doing a closing cost. If they had any closing costs. So we don't know if they have closing costs. Even if they do, I might be willing to bite the bullet on closing because of the 2 other main benefits that I get. I get an intro rate and I get a prime minus 0.5% and a 10-year draw, 80% LTV, very attractive. Okay, now let's look at the other banks. We have every other bank is at prime. So they're all equal in that sense. They're all offering the same 10-year draw, and they're all the same 80% LTV. So where these banks differ is intro rate and closing costs, and then max credit limit. Max credit line really isn't a huge value add to me personally. So if we're going to do a little bit of elimination, we could say, well, Lighthouse falls off because it doesn't have an intro rate option compared to the other 3 banks. So now we look at the intro rate options. 6.49, 5.99, 6.5, very competitive, very tight, and they all offer 12 months. But technically, the lowest option is Service Credit Union. Now, is it worth that little 0.01% to pay closing costs? A huge value to me is not having to really pay any closing costs to me. So 6.5%, 12 months, I like that over Service because no closing costs. But look at New Hampshire. New Hampshire Federal Credit Union is at 5.99, 12 months, 10-year draw, 80%, prime, no closing costs, with a max credit limit of $400,000. So my number 2 pick is going to be New Hampshire Federal Credit Union, number 2. So if it were me, I was living in the state of New Hampshire, I did my research, I found a bunch of banks, I read through it, I have my action items, I then narrowed my list from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, some 7 banks, narrowed down to 2 banks. Now I'm left with calling just these 2 banks, GFA and New Hampshire Federal Credit Union. I know that they cover my state. I'm a resident of New Hampshire, let's say. That's all lining up. Now I'm going to call them to verify the information that they're putting on their website. because I want to make sure that this is true, because banks can change things. So I want to make sure that their website is actually, in fact, up to date. All right. The biggest value add that GFA has over New Hampshire is that prime minus 0.5. The biggest value add that New Hampshire has over GFA is the 12-month promo at 5.99. No closing costs. With GFA, we don't know if there's closing costs or not. So if you call and they say, yep, no closing costs, oof, that's pushing me even further to GFA. We call New Hampshire and we say, hey, is there any auto pay discount involved? If they offer an auto pay discount of 0.25%, that might push me a little bit towards New Hampshire. And if their max credit line is in fact 400,000, let's say GFA is 250, okay, that might push me a little bit more towards New Hampshire. But honestly, if GFA has no closing costs, and I ask the same thing, do you guys have any additional discounts on top of the prime minus 0.5? And they say yes, whoa, now you're at prime minus 0.75%. Even more attractive, okay? So those are our top picks for the state of New Hampshire. Let's see if you guys have any questions, those that are live and present. Final reminder, each time that I'm going live, I'm offering my one-to-one financial coaching program, which is a lifetime service. You pay a one-time fee. I'm giving a $600 discount. I'm only taking on about 40 more families before the year is over, that we're going to go on a 10, 20, 30 year journey on of becoming debt-free, creating financial independence, creating financial freedom, retiring early, creating passive income, making investments, establishing assets, acquiring life insurance policies, building your own banking system. So many things that we're going to do, establishing a legacy, passing on wealth. There's so much that we can do together that involves you developing that trust first. I'm big on trust, establishing a level of trust through the camera, through the content, through the material, through the facts, through the experiences that I'm sharing with you here over time, and the commitment. So that offer is really for people that have been following this channel for quite some time now. You've been getting value, you've been doing the work, you've been getting the results. We can amplify those results with coaching. One-to-one, you get me and you get access to my entire team of other partners and people I work with to build your financial dream team around you, to not just create success, sustain it, perpetuate it, and have it live on for generations. Very, very important. Thank you for the information. Appreciate you. Here in Arizona. Eventually I'll get to Arizona. Real smart. That's good marketing. Yeah, so yep. So that was an earlier comment on one of the banks. I forgot which bank it was. That was doing, it was like home equity loan, real smart. You know, like they do whatever they can to get you to sign up for their home equity loan over their home equity line product. Do any banks go up to 90% LTV anymore? All of them do on the board. It's just you're not going to get the best offer. So yes, every single one of these banks go as high as 90%. Some of these banks go as high as 100%, but it comes at a cost. So it is more rare to see a bank that will do a 90% LTV, still give us an intro offer, and still give us a prime minus offer. Okay. RG says 66 years old, had an ex that took everything, and now you're starting over. You are not alone, my friend. I have plenty of clients over the years I've worked with that you could say money being a root or one of the root issues of divorce and separation, that lack of knowledge, not knowing what we don't know, and it bleeds into other areas of our life. So now that you're starting over, we get to reflect on the past, see where we messed up, where mistakes were made, and then still yet have the hope and courage that we can press forward despite whatever age we are at. Okay, so being that you're a man, it's even more possible to recover and revamp, I would argue, much faster than on average when I typically work with moms, women, single moms, divorced moms that weren't working for 10, 20 plus years in a marriage. They were a stay-at-home mom, so they were accustomed to not having to work and create income for themselves, then ended up in a divorce. Now they're 60, 65 years old, single, divorced mom, and haven't worked in 10 years, 15 years. So that can be much harder to overcome. And yet still, there have been cases, and I've been able to witness these cases where I work with moms that went through a divorce, separation of finance. They were out of the workforce for so many years, went back into the workforce, into an industry they did when they were in their 30s. Now they're 60 or 65, whatever the case may be. Maybe they're getting some kind of alimony. Maybe they got some sort of windfall in the divorce. Maybe they're getting checks in the settlement of the divorce, but it's still not really covering their lifestyle in that sense. And yet they were able to recover despite being in their senior years, and they're on their way to creating financial independence and freedom, which is amazing. Okay, so it is possible. Denzel, if we keep our chunk payment size no higher than our income, how little does interest rate matter? It matters a whole lot, I would argue, because if you're borrowing at 12% and I'm borrowing at 6, and even though you're making small bite-sized chunks, you're still doing bite-sized chunks multiple times per year, you're still paying that interest. Okay? So let's say somebody makes 10,000 a month, so that's going to be their chunk, 10,000 toward a debt. Just because you make 10,000, yes, you're paying down the line of credit extremely fast, but you're also running it back up just as fast. So if you only have a cash flow of $1,000, well, it's still technically going to take you more than a month, obviously, to pay off that line of credit because you took 10K out, did the chunk, 10K of income goes in, 9,000 or maybe less comes out of the line of credit. You're now still paying interest on 12% on 9,000 bucks. Then the following month, income goes in again. It's paying down the line of credit, but just as quickly as money went in, money is also coming out just as fast. So you're still paying that interest cost. Now, when it comes to micro chunking, we also want to look at what is it that we're hitting? What kind of debt are we paying off? Because if you're doing micro chunking with a 12% debt tool on a 6% amortized loan, that's not gonna, the math isn't gonna be in your favor, even though you're doing these small bite-sized chunks. So yes, interest rate matters a lot, in my opinion, and I would argue math would be on my side, although sometimes in my community with some of the content creators that promote this strategy of using HELOCs and debt tools are not going as detailed into the product itself of home equity line of credit. A lot of them just advocate go get one. A lot of them just say, go get one. Rate doesn't matter as much. I choose not to just play in that ball game because I know it can create a lot of hype. So for me, the question I ask myself is, why pay more if bank number one is offering less? Why pay more at bank number two? So that's just the thinking that I want my community, my audience to constantly be asking themselves is, am I doing business with a bank that's giving me the best option? Right? We come back to the board here, we look at the options, it's like, does it really make sense to go with Lighthouse Credit Union if I can go with GFA and get prime minus 0.5% and save 0.5%? Rate matters because my results are just going to get better. Okay? So hopefully that's helpful. Good point. Pulling the money at 12% is way worse than 8%. I was only focusing on the speed of the line of credit pay down. Thanks for changing my thought process. Yep. Great. Great work. Okay, so we are done for today. Thank you for being present. Tomorrow we will go live again. We're going to cover another state. We're going to keep this rhythm going at this pace. I should be able to hit every state by the end of October, maybe going into mid-November. I should be able to hit every state in the United States. So with that being said, God bless you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.